August 25th, 2015, meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for the Town of Fairfield. First item on the agenda is bills and communications and meeting minutes from July 28th, 2015. Have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Barris. Second by Commissioner Jacobson. Everybody have a copy of that? I reviewed it. I have no comments or changes. Anybody else have any comments, questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are adopted unanimously. Next item is 145 Brookside Drive, request of Attorney Fitzpatrick for a 90-day extension for filing final subdivision map, first extension.
Mr. Chairman, this was a two-lot subdivision approved by this commission back on May 26th. This is the first of two possible extensions. We do have the map in hand, but the bond is yet to be posted, which is not an unusual occurrence given the timing of things, so they're looking for the first of two potential 90-day extensions.
As of right.
Correct.
Can I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, and Commissioner Francis is sitting for Commissioner Calabrese on all items tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a motion?
Motion to grant the extension.
Okay. Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi and second by Commissioner Coleman. Any comments, questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The extension is granted unanimously. Next item is 414 Kings Highway, request of Fairfield Investor Associates for 100% release of an $86,786.50 bond pertaining to special permit improvements in a designed commercial district.
Okay, this is the site of the recently completed Walgreens at the intersection of Kings Highway and Jennings Road, a project that was approved by the Commission on January 8th of 2008. We did have a 50% release of this bond approved in February. The site work is now fully completed in accordance in the engineering department, which you have, recommends 100% release of the remaining 50% of the bond.
Pretty good. I didn't see that in the file.
Motion to approve it.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Coleman,
Second.
second by Commissioner Francis. Any comments or discussion on this item? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next is 479 Westway Road, request of Whitecap Advisors LLC for a 5-year extension of a special permit.
Okay, this is property, it's a 6.8 acre site on the westerly side of Westway Road in Southport. It's bounded on the north by Interstate 95 and on the south by Metro North Railroad. There was a 16-unit condominium development at the time called Bookmark of Southport, approved by this commission in October of 2006. And this is the first time, to my recollection, where this has come into play, but there was an amendment to the statutes not long after the recession came along that extended site plans for longer periods of time. And the prevailing statute gives a 9-year window with the opportunity for additional extensions for up to 5 years. So the 9-year window for this project would expire in October of this year. The site is idle. It went into initial bankruptcy. There was a group that bought it. They have a prospective purchaser that's interested in pursuing the development, although they're likely going to be submitting some revisions. They want to do the same number of units, but fewer bedrooms in smaller square footage per unit, because these were, if anybody recalls these were like 5,000 square foot units. They were rather large. So they're looking for some additional time to be able to consummate that deal and come back with some revisions to the plan. So this would be, that's all I have at this point.
Is the 5-year extension as of right under the statute?
It's at your discretion. You don't have to grant 5 years. The statute says one or more extensions not to exceed 5 years.
I see. Very good.
Matt, I just have a question for you.
Yep.
If the extension is granted, they'd be subject to the laws that were in effect in 2006.
Correct.
So they would not have to do any affordable housing in those condos?
Well, we don't have yet an amendment that would require that. That is coming up for hearing, but assuming,
But it's not coming up for the hearings, that it's not going to be under the 2006 law.
correct.
Yeah. So if they apply, they wouldn't be subject to this then? If they get the extension? I don't understand.
We do not have a regulation that mandates it at present.
Okay.
So you are correct that any extension would not be applicable to this particular project for that provision.
Thank you.
I make a motion to deny the extension.
Second.
I'll second it. Sorry.
The motion's been made to deny by Commissioner Lessie and seconded by Commissioner Jacobs.
I mean, we've had many planning meetings and many things have changed since 2006, especially for our rules and regulations. So if that's the case, they own the property, let them come back with a new application under today's guidelines and go from there. That's the way I see it.
I agree.
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, vaguely, I mean, 2006 is a long time ago. I think, even Mr. Kennelly wasn't here in 2006, and Mr. Wagner. I was here on this, I think I voted against it. I remember it being a very high-end condominium, like, we weren't even talking about affordable housing. I mean, I think they were like over $2 million or something, so something like that. So this was very high-end. It wasn't even in the realm of that. Now, it's not like I oppose this application or don't, I just think that if they're talking about a more modest development, you know, and they want some time, it sounds like a new plan anyway that should come before us. We should be reviewing plans, not just saying, well, we'll give you the extension to come up with a new plan. To me, the new plan's going to be something that's going to warrant a public hearing. We might very well approve it, but to me, it looks like a new, it's not just like, we're going to build the same 16 units we're going to build. It's like we're going to build something different. So I'm inclined to deny it just because I think it should come back before us as an application. I'm willing to hear other arguments. Again, I don't remember enough about this to say I like it or don't like it, just that it sounds like a different application, so I'd be inclined to deny it, as Mr. Leslie said.
Commissioner Francis?
I'd like to see compliance with our new sidewalk regulations and our trees in the parking lot regulations also. So, yes, I support the motion.
Anyone else? So from what I've heard also, it sounds like at least substantial modifications to what we approved previously is what they're contemplating. It expires in October, right? So if we were to deny this on the information that we have before us now, prior to October, could they seek another extension on some other grounds, or is this their one shot at that?
Well, no, that would be at your discretion. I mean, it hasn't technically expired yet,
Right.
so if they, between now and then, put a package together to argue that, hey, this really isn't any different than what we had, it's still at your discretion. Two things about that. You know, forgetting any modification to the plan for a second, let's just say, for the sake of argument, they were going to pursue the exact same plan. The reason for time limits has been articulated by several of the commissioners, that things change over time. Regulations change, plans change, so that in and of itself it could be a legitimate reason not to extend it further, because there have been subsequent changes to the regulations and potentially some forthcoming changes to the regulations that wouldn't apply to this project. So that in and of itself is a valid reason not to extend. But to answer your question, within that window of, between now and October, they could repackage another request, and if those circumstances compel you to think differently, that's at your discretion.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay. The motion on the table is to deny, so a vote in the affirmative is to deny. Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The item is denied unanimously. Next item is new applications to recommend a public hearing. First is 5066 Umpqua Place, special permit application of Umpqua Place Partners, 50 LLC, and Umpqua Place Partners 66 LLC for additions and alterations to establish a medical office building in the Center Design District.
Okay, this is a special permit application to do, as it says, that just to kind of reference you, this is the former Blynn's Toy Store on Umpqua Place, if you're familiar with that. For some of us, a landmark, for others, perhaps not, but that's the site of this proposed development. It does require a public hearing.
Make a motion to move to public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Alessi and seconded by Commissioner Jacobson. Any comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. Next item is old business, 309 Barberry Road, special exception application of the American Institute for Neuro-Integrated Development, Inc., to establish a school and offices for charitable institutions in an existing building in the AA zone.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to go briefly over, present what was outlined for you at the hearing, and then I'm just going to, again, briefly go over the findings you need to make when reviewing and acting upon an application like this. As mentioned, the applicant was founded in 1992 as a 501c3 Connecticut nonprofit corporation, Giant Steps. The mission, as stated at the hearing, for this corporation was to enhance the lives of children and adults with biologically based learning and development disorders, and by developing and maintaining outreach, educational, recreational, therapeutical programs, and supporting related clinical and medical research. The property that this proposed application is involved with is 11.74 acres, includes 2 buildings, and is located in a residential AA zoning district. The property was formerly the site of the Christ the King Prep and Grammar School. The applicant rehabbed the grammar school building and opened Giant Steps back in 1999. The remaining building, the 23,000 square foot building, which was formerly the high school, remains vacant. The intent of the applicant is to renovate the vacant building, adding a small service cafe in the front of the building as well as a vestibule for security purposes. The building will utilize by next step a companion use, this Giant Step, addressing the needs of Giant Step students as they reach adulthood. 6 rooms on the second floor would be made available for nonprofit organizations, provided that they agree to provide vocational opportunities for the young adults. The proposal is to add a 4,335 square feet of general office and 33 students to the current Giant Steps property. 30 students to the Giant property, which will be called, as I mentioned, Giant Steps. Our next step, access will remain from Barberry Road. As defined at the hearing, the first floor of the building will house an office for the applicant's nonprofit organization and school. The 6 rooms on the first floor will house speech therapy, technology, augmentative communication, music therapy, art studio, vocational training, and a small social skills group. The auditorium gym would be made functional with an occupational physical therapy, sensory integration gym area in the back. And the third component of the plan includes, as I mentioned, making 6 rooms on the second floor available to selective groups of nonprofits that agree to provide vocational opportunities for the people, the young adults attending this facility. There will be a common area where there will be shared office support for the use of the nonprofits, copiers, shredders, mailing, collating, special event supports, computers, and varied jobs will be made available to vocational students. There would be a small addition in the front of the building which would house the service cafe, and as I mentioned, a small vestibule would be added to the front entrance. Is based on a recommendation from the Fairfield Police Department for security. All right, so that real briefly and quickly is what was described to you as the proposed use for the second building. As I mentioned to you, in this particular type of application, there are 2 findings essentially that you have to make. One is that in our regulations for residential districts under section 5.1.4.d, as to additional permitted uses subject to the securing of a special exception in accordance with our section 27, when not conducted as for-profit businesses, schools and charitable institutions are permitted. The definition under 31.2.4, our definition section defines charitable institution as organizations or corporations of public or illuminatory character which provide benefits or services. So first of all, we determined that the proposed application is a permitted use subject to the special exception. As to the special exception, the type of findings you need to make under our section 27.4 defines the conditions for approval for special exception use. And they include, as you all know very well, but I will outline them again for you. 27.4.1, the location, type, character, and size of use in buildings and structures shall be in harmony with and conform with the appropriate and orderly development of the town and the neighborhood, and not hinder or discourage appropriate development and use of adjacent property or impair its value. 27.4.2 states the nature and location of the use and buildings or structures shall be such that there will be adequate access for fire protection. Section 27.4.3 reads, the street serving the proposed use shall be adequate to carry prospective traffic. Provision shall be made for entering and leaving the property without creating undue hazard to traffic or congestion. And adequate off-street parking and loading shall be provided at the same lot in accordance with our Section 28 parking regulations. Final finding, consistent with what's being proposed here, is under Section 27.4.8.1, provisions of entering and leaving the premises to be as such a manner that no traffic hazard are created. That, real briefly, Mr. Chairman, is what was presented to the commission, and those are outlined in the findings you need to make for this particular application.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We have a motion to deny by Commissioner Coleman,
Second.
second by Commissioner Jacobson. Commissioner Coleman?
Is it on? I would very much like to see next steps built someplace. I have two nephews on the spectrum. I have a friend with an autistic Down syndrome child. I have another friend with two autistic twins. I know how desperate parents are to find somebody who will work with their children rather than just warehouse them. But I feel that the progress of the few can't come at the expense of the many. It appears that the school as it stands now, the existing Giant Step School, is already interfering with the neighborhood substantially. The traffic is impairing property values, perhaps, and certainly the traffic is creating a hazard based on the observation of my peers and the testimony of people during the open hearing. So I feel that it would be of more damage to the people already in the neighborhood than of benefit to the handful of children who would benefit from the program. So I will vote against it.
Commissioner Jacobson?
This is a really hard decision. I know, I have a friend who has a child on the spectrum as well, and I know there's a need for this program, and I respect the people that work with these children and adults so much. But this is the zoning commission. I visited the site twice, and the one time I was there, I counted 62 cars coming out of the road. And it's a small road with limited access. And on a personal note, I have a situation on my street, a very small street, that for 6 weeks a year, we have incredible traffic all night long, every night. And it's terrible. It's a safety hazard, and I really, anyway, that's beside the point. I can't support this application. I know there's a need. I thought a lot about it. I visited the site twice. I listened. I read all the papers. But I just can't support this application.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnes?
Yeah, I would support the motion to deny also. just a few points. I don't want to reiterate what was already said. I don't disagree with anything that was said. This is a special exception application in a residential zone. So to be clear about that, almost every school and every church in our town exists in a residential zone. That's what special exception's for. There was some misconception that this is a zoning change. It's not a zoning change. That's where schools locate, in residential zones, which they're allowed. So if we accept it as a school, the key question for us is strictly a zoning question. Does it meet our special exception applications? I mean, I agree. There's a need for such a use to serve the growing population of adults on the autism spectrum. I also have personal knowledge and relationship with a family member on the spectrum, and I'm familiar with a school like this, and I could see the tremendous value that it would bring. But that's not what we decide. It really isn't. We approve things that we may not like because they meet our regulations, and we deny things we like because they don't. And again, I'm concerned in the special exception that if it was allowed, does it meet it? And I really, of all the schools in town, I say they're all in a residential zone. I think just about every one except maybe St. Thomas is in a residential zone. And I can't think of many with one entrance and exit and at the end of a cul-de-sac. Even the ones that are on small streets have two ways in and out. I'm thinking of like Stratfield and Jennings and schools like that. So it's a lot of burden to place. And with the traffic, I don't disagree with Mr. Galante's report. He said the road can handle it, and he's right. The road can handle it when you're just looking at peak hour traffic, vehicle trips, delays, low service, that type of thing. The question is, should it handle it? Thinking back to, just some historical perspective, which, Mr. Fitzpatrick is absolutely right. This once was a school. It closed in the 1970s. A lot has changed since then. I think about the way we deliberate on development. I'm thinking, would we ever, if this was brand new, forgetting that even Giant Steps is there, approve a school at the end of a cul-de-sac like this with one entrance and exit? I mean, it might have been approved in, whatever, the 1960s. The commission somehow in the 90s thought Giant Steps was a good idea, and obviously it's been great for the people that go, but I'm not really sure we would ever burden a street like that to do that. I mean, it's not up to us. I wish there was another entrance and exit. I think if we had something where somehow you get there from Mill Hill Road, and other people said that's another set of stakeholders, and that may be true, but I have nothing against the school. I just can't see adding more to that street. And again, it's not a question of can it handle it or the objections of any particular neighbor or what was said. It should it, and I do not believe it should. I do not believe it meets our criteria for a special exception in 2741.
So your major point is undue traffic.
Yes, 2741, and I think it's 2748. There's something about proper entrance and egress. I don't see one way in and one way out as proper entrance and egress. And we even have rules now where we limit the houses on cul-de-sacs because we don't want too many people on a place where you can only get in one way. And now we're talking about a school at the end of a cul-de-sac. So yes, I would say in myself it's 27.4.1. 20, which talks about property values, 27.4.3, which talks about traffic and the streets to carry the prospective traffic. And I also looked at 27.4.8, which is provision for entering and leaving the premises so that no traffic hazards are created. So those are my major reasons, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Kennelly, do you have any comments? No? I have some comments.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Alessi.
I am not going to support the denial. I would have rather have seen this school approved without the not-for-profits because they weren't really explained to us as to what they were going to be. I would have looked at the traffic report and deducted the traffic for the not-for-profits. I do think it's a permitted use. I think the road can handle it as described in the traffic report. I was out there for 2 mornings and 1 afternoon. I was out there 3 times. So, I saw the cars going up and down. There are more cars than normal on a quiet street. I give you that's for sure. I have to tell you, it's sad though, that there's a school at the end of a neighborhood, and the neighborhood association doesn't get to talk or meet with the school on a regular basis if there are problems. I don't understand why there's nobody, a group leader from the neighborhood, that if they had these problems over the years, would contact the school on a regular basis. I called the police department to see if there were any complaints, and there were none for the last 10 years. And I find that sad that has come up in a hearing that this had to take place here. And honestly, it's not a zoning issue if people are speeding or throwing cigarettes or talking on their cell phone. That's not what we're here for. That's what the police department's here for. You know, we sat through it. And I have to understand, you know, it's the policy of the zoning commission that when public hearing is going on, that we sit here, you know, politely, and we listen to everything you have to say, no matter what it is, whether it pertains to the application or it doesn't pertain to the application. As far as I'm concerned, there was really one gentleman who spoke on behalf of the neighbors and actually had zoning regulation numbers in his presentation and spoke. That's what we're here for. We're here to hear that, not the other nonsense. And to the parents whose kids to go to that school, and Mrs. Roberts, you heard some real vile and disgusting comments from some of the neighbors. And I sat here, and I was really crawling in my skin. So to you, I want to apologize, because I should have said something, and I should have nipped it in the bud right then and there. There's no reason why any of you had to hear those horrible comments that was being said. And in the future, whether it's policy or not, I'm going to tell people, I'm going to call them out when they come to that podium if those comments are being said, because it's uncalled for. So for that, I apologize. So I do not support this denial. I think the school is needed. I would have supported it without the other businesses in there, because we don't know what they are, their hours of operation, the amount of people. But there is a need for this, and I really, truly believe that 25 students in a building that's over 4,000 square feet is not a big use, and would really keep things to a minimum. So that's how I feel.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Alessi. Commissioner Cannelli?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I really struggled with this because I was here for the first public hearing in person, and I wasn't physically in place. I watched on Fair TV on demand the public hearing, and I very much understood the anxieties, and I also understand the complex relationships people feel. In other words, to address, for example, the Vice Chairman said, Commissioner Alessi said about people complaining to the police, I can understand how people might feel uncomfortable calling up the police about a school that they know does good work, for example, and that they might, you know, not want to do that, and feel in some way that the existing environment was one that they felt they could live with, and then brought this to the fore when they saw the expansion, if they were that concerned. But ultimately, addressing those concerns, and anticipating those concerns, I did extensively question Mr. Galante. And I have to agree, though, while I tease Mr. Galante a great deal about the term insignificant traffic and things like this, this was an example, at least statistically, of one of the least in terms of total impact when you look at the statistical traffic report. Extremely low in terms of, and if you look at our regulations, because, you know, I respect very much Commissioner Barrett, who always goes on the numbers, I mean, not always on the numbers, but really looks to our regulations and looks to the numbers. And 27.4.3, the streets serving the proposed use shall be adequate to carry the traffic. And that there should be, there shall be provision for entering and leaving the property. And that's a real struggle for me. But ultimately, I think that from my perspective, Commissioner Alessi's reasoning that the school is, and the use of the school is small enough that the true everyday impact is not such that the issue of the entranceway rises to the level of a real safety issue. We talk about how development works. Well, this school predates some of the residential development in that area. So, to me, to some extent, you know, when you buy in an area, what is there, and there's always that possibility that, well, there's a school there, and who knows what might happen. I think there's no one who's going to say that the mission of Giant Steps isn't great, but ultimately, for me, it's an existing school building, so it does harmonize under 27.4.1. It's there already. They're not looking to return this to some high level of student activity that was predated, that was there previously when the building was first constructed. Not even close. So narrowly, I'm in this case with Commissioner Alessi, and I will oppose the motion to deny the application.
Thank you. So, I'm kind of struggling about how to begin. It's so interesting to hear the different perspectives that we are each, coming to the table with here. Yeah, I share in the profound level of respect and admiration that I think everyone feels in the room for Ms. Roberts and the success of the Giant Steps program. I don't think anyone can question the need for such educational programs, and Giant Steps has obviously been remarkable in this area. I don't think anyone can question the need for services to adults on the spectrum as is being proposed. Those that age out of Giant Steps need a place to get continued therapy and vocation training, as I understand it. I don't have quite the familiarity with those on the spectrum that some of my other commissioners do, but I can appreciate the testimony that we've heard and the experiences that people have brought into the record. When Ms. Roberts' organization first acquired the land and the buildings to open Giant Steps, there were 2 buildings on that land, and both of them remain today. One would remain vacant as the Giant Steps School opened, but I don't think there's any question that this second building would be put into use in some capacity in the future. It's been vacant. That use in the future must, of course, though, be in compliance with our regulations. I reviewed the transcript that was provided by Attorney Fitzpatrick, and it was clear at the hearing on the first application that Giant Steps as an educational institution met our special exception regulations, and there was no reservation with regard to the second building. But here is the first important point I'd like to make, because this is a residential zone, and unless the proposed use meets the enumerated special exceptions, then only residential uses can be put in the residential zone. And Giant Steps, the school that exists today, is an educational institution. It has been certified by the Department of Education in Hartford. We received all of that in our record. The certificate exists in our record. It has a curriculum. So when Ms. Roberts applied previously for the special exception to open Giant Steps, it was approved in accordance with our regulations as an educational institution under the special exception in the residential zone. When our regulations were first adopted in the 50s and 60s, I don't think anyone envisioned a school such as Giant Steps. I don't think that when our regulations were enacted in the 50s and 60s, and when there was a provision for educational institutions in the residential zone, that anyone envisioned these kinds of special educational institutions. But that's changed. Now the Department of Education grants certifications for educational institutions that provide these programs. That agency adapted over time to certify programs that meet a need for children and young adults on the spectrum to be educated. And the Department of Education evolved to meet those needs, and as such, the application in the 90s fit within our regulations. It was an educational institution. I say all this because I feel we need to be very careful. Our charge is to uphold our regulations. The words mean what they say, and they say what they mean. We have to strictly construe them so that everyone is operating on the same playing field. We can't make arbitrary and capricious interpretations of our regulations. And indeed, we just recently voted unanimously to place a condition of approval on the new development on Commerce Drive to require the developer to either add another affordable unit or reduce the total number of units to strictly comply with our regulation requiring at least 10% affordable units. I could recite numerous examples over the years I've been on the commission where we've taken that position, and we have to. But that is, of course, all against the backdrop of the fact that we also have the capacity to change our regulations. Tonight is a perfect example, because, you know, we previously had an application for doggy daycare, which did not fit within the explicit enumerations of our regulations, and we denied the application, and we asked the applicant to come back with a proposal to make an amendment. And we sit in two different capacities. One, in our legislative capacity, where we have discretion to amend the regulations, and another where we interpret and apply them. So, you know, now here tonight, after several sessions, we had an initial amendment for the doggy daycare, which we didn't even like. We asked them to revise it so to make sure that the doggy daycare would not be next to a residential area, you know, and we're going to be considering that next. So we have discretion to amend the regulations. You know, that exists for a very specific purpose. The public is put on notice of the possibility that change can occur. And those in the zone don't get surprised when they see things happen in their community that don't fit within the regulations. We should all be entitled to rely on the plain meaning of our regulations. So for doggy daycare, we asked for the amendment. We had a public hearing. People came out in support. We're going to consider that later. We have the Fairfield Housing Authority here today to present an application to amend our affordable housing regulations to evolve consistent with current trends and the needs of our community. But the same is true for this application. It doesn't meet our regulations for the special exception. I asked tough questions at the hearing, at the very end of the hearing, because I had to. Ms. Roberts, you answered me honestly because you had to. The special exception categories that they seek approval for here are for educational institutions and charitable institutions. I'll start with the charities. We have a definition of charitable institution in our regulations. I start with charities because, frankly, it's the easier one. There are organizations or corporations of public or elementary character which provide benefits or services. The record is really clear here. The proposal is to provide lease space to start-up nonprofits. We don't know what those are going to be. We don't know what business they're going to be involved in, but they're not going to be charities. There was no commitment that they were going to be charities. Charities can be for-profit enterprises. You know, there are various examples of different corporate structures where charitable organizations are for-profit companies. Google.org is a very good example of a for-profit charitable institution. So to provide a proposal where we're going to lease 3,400 square feet to 6 different nonprofits doesn't fit within our regulations. So, you know, we could have, as Commissioner Alessi suggested, start rewriting the application and putting conditions of approval on the application that, you know, we approve it, but without the businesses, etc. But, you know, that really isn't our role. Ms. Roberts is in the best position to figure out what alternatives would exist that might be consistent with our regulations. What's before us is not. I started with the charities because that was the easier case to make, because I don't believe that the other part of the application meets the educational institution perspective. You know, it's not going to be certified by the Department of Education. I understand from her testimony that this is a program that's not been done before. I don't dispute that there is a need for this, but I don't think that it's fair to the community and the neighbors on the street to try to put a square peg in a round hole. If there is some alternative here, then there should be an application to amend our regulations to provide some sort of accommodation for something in this space. There's a second building on this property. Our town as a whole could consider that and adopt specific regulations to allow or restrict such facilities. And we, in our legislative capacity, could consider these issues in an appropriate context and not the way it's been presented to us now. To do otherwise would not serve a good purpose, and it would also frustrate everyone's view of our commission, and I think our town government as a whole. Another way to approach this is for there to be certification by the Department of Education. Now, there may be some mechanism by which that can be accomplished, but that's not before us. What's before us is specific evidence that this will not be an educational institution, it won't be certified by the Department of Education, and therefore it doesn't fit within our special exception. Now, perhaps in that process, the neighbors and Ms. Roberts can work together to find a solution that all can get behind in unison. Perhaps not. But on this application, I agree that the application should be denied. Thank you. Commissioner Francis?
Very well phrased. I know I've been struggling with this for 2 weeks. It's so needed. Giant Steps is obviously outstanding. These young people have to move on to something, but it's the nonprofits in there that really bothers me. That you just don't know what it's going to involve, and the construction that's going to be required to remediate and rehab the building, bring it up to code. I think the neighbors are going through a lot, and I don't know, it's just so two-pronged, but I think you're right.
Commissioner Barris?
I think there's some excellent points here. Very interesting points the chairman made. I'm in concurrence with, I didn't say it before, with Commissioner Francis, you said about the nonprofits. Those are ambiguous right now. There's 6 potential things that can only be described as businesses, whether for-profit or not. They're putting a business in a residential zone that's going to bring stock there, which we don't know. And all needed, I could see why a facility like that would need, something to try to teach skills and vocational abilities, but we just don't know what those things are. And to me, that is putting a business in a residential zone, which we do resist. So I agree with your assessment that, whether it's charitable or whatever, it just sticks kind of ambiguous nonprofits. So I can't see approving it with that. So I would agree with that. Schools, I don't I respect what you said. I'm not completely sure because you've created I don't see that defined in our regs. So I think we do have some discretion to say what is a school was not. I think it was meant to mean elementary, middle school, high schools, colleges, and universities, which are enumerated, but it just says school. So I think we do have some discretion there, but we should say where's the point to define what that is. And I'm not sure you couldn't have some adult school, maybe not this one, that could be defined as a school. I don't know. Maybe there's some certification or something, but that I was a little less sure of.
And that really, I appreciate that, and I thought about that. But even as an adult school, there are adult schools, and there are certifications for adult education programming. There's postgraduate education that gets certified that has a curriculum that you get. I mean, there's something there, not just kind of an amorphous proposal that we're going to have folks come in and they'll have an hour a day with an internship and they'll have some therapy. There are these businesses then for the rest of the day, they're going to be going on about their own business. Are they going to have signs? Are they going to be visitors? What I don't believe it fits within the enumerated uses in the special exception. I mean, so I also do concur that the evidence in the record, I don't think supports the case that the road can accommodate the traffic and that there aren't, I agree with Commissioner Barrett's summary on the technical issues relating to traffic and egress and such. And, it's in our discretion. I mean, right, just because it's a school in a residential zone, we have to consider all these other things. It's not like just because it's a school and it's enumerated and it's in the residential zone, it gets to go there. We still have all these other things that we need to think about and consider. And so I do support that as well. But I came at it from sort of just, sort of the top question, right? I mean, does it even meet the enumerated, things? And, I wanted I started thinking about, well, can we put, conditions on it, can we make, but we're not in the business of rewriting applications. We shouldn't be doing that. So, anyway, that's where I came.
I could just one
Yep, Commissioner Canelli.
I mean, I think it sounds pretty settled, but if the applicant and the neighborhood follow the path that you suggest, Mr. Chairman, one thing to consider is that, I mean, I believe in public schools and in university situations that there is oftentimes there are often well-defined cooperative education opportunities. In other words, relationships between different kinds of entities beyond the educational system, businesses, nonprofits, and others that interact with local public schools and universities, but those are usually defined within a curricular, setting and things like that. So that's something else maybe to consider, but something to throw out there.
So, it's difficult. It's, this is not easy stuff. Anyone else have any comments? No? We ready to vote? The motion on the table is to deny. The vote in the affirmative is to deny. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay is from Commissioner Alessi and Commissioner Canelli. Any abstentions? So the item is denied 5-2. Next items on our agenda are the zoning regulation amendment, application of Attorney Frank Johnson to amend Section 12.4 of the zoning regulations to permit dog daycare in the design commercial district. And should we have a motion first to consider these together, or should we do them separately?
Motion.
I'm sorry. There's a question. It's two separate actions.
Yeah.
What I was going to do is
separate.
I was just going to outline, first of all, the amendment overview and then the special permit application. I could do it all at once, but then it would be two separate. Essentially, as you know, the procedure is you would have to approve the amendment first and then address the site plan. So, Mr. Chairman, should you want me?
Yes.
I will review really quickly what was presented to the commission. Here, the applicant is seeking an amendment of our regulations and to add a section 12.4.28.7 to permit dog daycare businesses in our design commercial district, subject to receiving a special exception. There is no intention at all for this to be a kennel or boarding. It is strictly daycare dog sitting operation. The dog daycare use is regulated both locally and statewide through the Department of Agriculture. Animals will be spending the overwhelming bulk of their day inside. The average length of stay would be 9 to 10 hours. The benefit of allowing the dog daycare in Fairfield is that it gives pet owners an alternative to leaving their dogs at home, crated, kenneled, or locked in a house all day. The dog daycare is for a full weekday or weekend service designed for current stay-at-home dogs. The proposed both indoor and outdoor fenced areas. Again, Fairfield zoning only permits veterinarians to operate kennels with no provisions for dog daycare. No veterinarians in the area no veterinarians in this area would have daycare. That essentially outlines what was proposed in describing the request for the amendment. What I'll do right now, just to refresh your memory, I'll read the amendment really quick. Again, the proposed amendment would be to add section 12.4.28.7, and it would read, use may include, again, it's for dog daycare, use may include commercial dog care, provided that there is no overnight kenneling, not occupied by more than one dog per 50 square feet of indoor space, must provide an outdoor run connected therein, which is fenced in. Fence shall be designed to prevent animals from overhanging any property line, and the facility must be inspected and licensed by the state of Connecticut, and the use cannot abut a residential district. So again, that is the amendment application portion of this procedure. Next, what I'm going to go really quickly over is what the actual special permit application site plan proposal is, if in fact the amendment is approved. The proposed building that this use would be proposed in is located at 154 Kings Highway Cutoff. It's a single-story commercial structure built in 1953. The dog daycare will occupy the entire building. The exterior of the building will remain unchanged. It will not make any changes to the structure itself. There will be an outdoor dog run in the back of the building. Parking for the staff is on site, as well as people coming and going, dropping off pets. There is also a one-way circular driveway in front of the building, utilized for drop-off and pickup. This building, as required, would be located, or is located, in our design commercial district, and it does not abut a residential district. Again, the Pet Mom's Doggy Daycare will not be a kennel, as mentioned as far as what was being proposed as the amendment, or a boarding facility. The Pet Mom's Doggy Daycare intent is to operate from the single, this freestanding building, indoor outdoor access and fenced barriers, access, outside runs, special flooring, ventilation. The premises must be easily cleaned and sterilized. This all has to do with requirements having to do with the Connecticut Department of Agriculture when they talk about this type of daycare use. The proposed hours are Monday through Friday, full day, 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., a.m. half day, 6:30 a.m. to noon, p.m. half day, 1 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And the weekend hours that will be there, they mentioned they'll probably be similar to the weekday, but they did not have any specifics at this time. That, Mr. Chairman, is essentially the two, outlining the two applications that are in front of you. And again, as I mentioned, the procedure at this point would be to review first the zone amendment, acting on that, and then pending the approval of that, then you would, or whatever the action is, you would react to the special permit.
Yeah, so, and I haven't called the special exception application yet, so we'll, we've got the zoning regulation amendment on the table, Fred. Okay, very good. Questions for staff or a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi. Second by Commissioner Barretts. No comment, Commissioner Barretts?
I enthusiastically support this application. What you said before about getting the words right, I'm sorry, it took a while to get the words right through, whatever meetings and delays, but I mean, it wasn't right the first time. I'm comfortable with the words now and adopting this as a new regulation for dog daycare.
Anyone else? No? Yeah, I concur. So I express appreciation to the applicant here for sort of working with the process and bearing with us. It was important to, have our concerns, aired and have the opportunity for public comment and everything. So I also agree. I mean, I think that the requirements for our amending the regulations are met. The need, et cetera.
Just have a
Mr. Chairman?
procedural question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know, I think we discussed this, but Mr. Kennelly's not voting on this.
Yes.
Commissioner Noonan is sitting, I believe, I just needed to, did you make,
I watched the second, I was here for the first proposal, and then second proposal I saw on Fair TV, so I'm able to sit for it.
Okay. I remember. And you did likewise?
Excuse me?
Was it last week? Last
The
meeting?
hearing was last meeting, that's correct.
Okay, no, I don't think I watched that part of it.
Okay.
I watched the Barbary Road part twice.
Okay. All right, so you have six, you need four affirmative votes out of six.
Four out of six, okay. So Commissioner Noonan is sitting for Commissioner Kennelly, and Commissioner Francis is not acting on the matter. All right? Any further comments? No? We're good on the requirements and everything, right? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item carries unanimously. Next is item C, 154 Kings Highway Cutoff, special exception application of Attorney Frank Johnson to establish a dog daycare use in the design commercial district.
Again, I went over it really quickly, unless you want me to do it again.
No.
The application was submitted, consistent with the proposed amendment that you are just approved.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion approved by Commissioner Lessy, second by Commissioner Jacobson. All right, anybody need any questions, further discussion? No? Everybody ready to vote? Okay, same, Commissioner Noonan, you're for Commissioner Calabrese, and Commissioner Francis, you're not voting. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item is compliances, 1596 Post Road, compliance application of Hartford Sign and Design for a sign plan in the Center Design District.
Okay, as outlined in the notes before, this is a single-tenant building that, since it was built, was the home of Media Wave Video Store. The new tenant is an athletic shoe and apparel store. The sign proposed is a reverse channel letter style sign, or what they call a halo lit channel letter. The illumination is directed towards the building, so the sign faces remain opaque. It complies with the provisions of our regulations with respect to size, and there are similar halo lit reverse channel letter signs in the neighborhood downtown.
I have a question
Yes.
on the proposal. So, if you look at the color photo, there is a notation below the front wheel of the car that says, all door and window graphics TBD.
Okay,
See that?
I do.
I think they already have stuff in their windows now.
Are we approving window graphics?
No, they're not proposing any. Our regulations allow indoor signage as long as it's not illuminated. Graphics applied to the interior of a window is not considered a sign by our definition. We prohibit graphics we prohibit signs within a building that either flash or illuminate visible from the exterior. So they couldn't do anything illuminated, but if they apply window graphics, our regulations permit that, as long as it's on the interior of the building.
Very good. Okay.
Another question I have after reading this, it's blue vinyl, so the blue is going to light up, right?
No. If it's a typical channel letter sign,
Right.
it would.
Right.
But a reverse channel letter, the opening, it faces the building, so the illumination shines. I can give you an example that...
No, I agree.
All the signs on the, I keep calling it the borders, but the old Fairfield Store building, where Fairfield University Bookstore, Victoria's Secret, those are the same type of reverse channel letter. They're black letters, but the light shines behind it. What's it, Quattrapazzi is a similar sign.
No, the only reason I asked is after I looked at this, I saw that it was vinyl, blue vinyl, so I was thinking that the blue vinyl is going to illuminate as well. That's the only
It
reason
will
why I
not.
said that.
If it was like opaque.
No, I agree.
Our regulations prohibit internal illumination downtown.
Okay.
But
No, I
the
know.
commission has determined that reverse channel letters, because the faces don't light up, it just kind of creates kind of a halo around it. Plan B sign that was just put up is a similar style. So no, it'll look blue during the day, but it won't light up blue.
All right.
Okay. So we need a motion on this.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman?
Motion to approve, Commissioner Kennelly. Second by Commissioner Coleman. Any further discussion? Questions? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? This sign is approved unanimously. Next is public hearing. Do we need to break, or you just... All right. Does anybody need a... All right. So we'll adjourn for 5 minutes.
TV ready? TV ready? TV's ready? Oh, I thought it went outside, that's why I asked. No, I thought you went up.
Everybody good? I'll call the meeting back to order. Next item on our agenda is public hearing.
Over my head.
Can I have a motion to hear items 1 and 2 together?
I make the motion to hear 1 and 2 together.
Motion to consolidate 1 and 2 by Commissioner Lessy.
Second?
Second by Vice Commissioner Coleman. Any comments or discussion on that?
Nope.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? Okay, so their motion carries unanimously. So I'll call public hearing item number 1, zoning regulation amendment, application of the Affordable Housing Committee of the Town of Fairfield to amend sections 10.6.9, 10.6.10, 10.17.3, and 10.17.5 in the Design Residence District Regulations regarding density and design standards for affordable housing. And item number 2, zoning and subdivision regulations, an application of the Affordable Housing Committee of the Town of Fairfield to amend section 25.7 of the zoning regulations and 2.7 of the subdivision regulations regarding inclusionary zoning.
Good evening. My name is,
Just pull that down.
my name is Steve Grothwell, 132 Adley Road, and I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Committee here in town. And I wanted to thank you for allowing us to present to you tonight. As the commission knows, the Affordable Housing Committee recently spent over 18 months working to update the town's affordable housing plan. And during that period, we met with several interested parties and stakeholders in town. We met with neighborhood groups, elected officials, town officials, private citizens, state elected officials, and the commission itself. Our update, which was published in November of last year, contained 11 action items, and tonight's presentation contains 2 of those action items. The cover of our report from last year contains, I think, the heart of the entire report. This report, very detailed, comprehensive, many pages, but the cover carries, I think, the real key. The first is diversifying Fairfield's housing portfolio, and the second is taking control of our future. Tonight's action items are the first step in that direction. None of the 11 action items by themselves will fully address our town's need for affordable and workforce housing, but each is another tool in the toolkit that we will need in order to achieve success. And so with that, I will turn the presentation over to Mark Barnhart. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Mark Barnhart. I'm the Director of Community Economic Development for the Town of Fairfield. I'm appearing this evening on behalf of the Affordable Housing Committee to present several recommendations with respect to amendments, proposed amendments to our zoning regulations, subdivision regulations. The first, I'll take them individually. I know you've combined them, but I'll take them individually in terms of explaining what the intent and purpose of these changes are. Is to recommend amendment to Section 10 of our regulations pertaining to the regulatory requirements of the Designed Residence District. So the overall intent of these particular set of changes is to provide a more meaningful alternative for developers who may be considering a set-aside development application pursuant to Section 8-30G of the Connecticut General Statutes, which we know all too well. And secondly, to make other relatively minor, what I would consider relatively minor technical amendments for the purpose of greater clarity and consistency. So the first set of changes deal with Section 10.6.9, which would modify the terms under which a proposed elderly family development will qualify for a density bonus. I note that elderly family development is a defined term elsewhere in our regs, particularly specifically Section 31.2.12, and we would propose that you change the more ambiguous language to be occupied exclusively elderly families in favor of the definition that you provide elsewhere in the regs in section 31.2.12 of elderly family development, which is more comprehensively defined as a term. If we were to change, the more substantive change, as I said, would modify the terms in which an elderly development would qualify for a density boost. Presently, elderly family developments can achieve or receive a density bonus without making any provision for affordable or below market rate units. This proposed change would require that elderly developments would need to set aside at least or not less than 20% of all units within such development as below market rate housing to receive the benefit of a density bonus. We're also proposing to delete within this section 10.6.9 reference to maximum occupancy and unit size for units within an elderly housing development. The purpose here is not so much that there shouldn't be minimum square footage requirements, but the question is whether or not it's most appropriate for zoning regulations to deal with this, whether it should be dealt with as part of building and housing code requirements. With respect to section 10.6.10, the committee is similarly proposing that, or recommending that you consider modifying the terms in which a proposed affordable housing development might qualify for this same density bonus. At present, an applicant would need to meet the definition of a set-aside development. In other words, would have to have a section 8-30G compliant application in order to receive a density bonus. And we would submit that a density bonus is no utility or no use under such circumstances, since the developer that's proposing a set-aside development pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 8-30G would simply avail himself of the protections afforded under the state statute and not care whether or not he was receiving any kind of density bonus or consideration from this board. We submit that if you want to make a viable alternative, provide a viable alternative to a developer that might be considering making an application, then we must be prepared to at least offer slightly better terms than what he might otherwise receive under existing state statutes. In this case, we're proposing that we mirror the language contained in Connecticut General Statutes 124B, or the so-called Home Connecticut law, to provide that a development where at least 20% of all dwelling units be affordable to households with incomes that are below 80% of the area median income would then qualify for density bonus. So by decreasing the percentage of deed-restricted affordable units from 30% to 20%, and by increasing the income eligibility requirements from the current 60-80 split to 80% of AMI, the intent is to provide a pathway that applicants that might be considering making an application under 8-30G consider making an application that might be more favorably received by the town in this body under this provision of the regulations. We're also proposing that you consider deleting reference to minimum bedroom count for affordable units. Frankly, I'm not sure why that exists. The regulations currently specify that such units should have a minimum of 2 bedrooms. I don't know why, again, we would prescribe a minimum bedroom count for affordable units, especially in the current circumstances when there's strong demand for smaller unit size developments, studio and 1-bedroom apartments. So I think, that is something that we should consider carefully. Finally, we're proposing that the minimum term of a deed restriction on any affordable housing developed under this section be increased from 25 years to at least 40 years as provided under existing state statutes. We may want to consider going beyond that, but at least we should bring it into conformance with what is currently allowed for under state statutes, which is a 40-year term. While some of these changes are not specifically referenced in the affordable housing plan that Chairman Grathwall alluded to, those pertaining to section 10.6.10, as I mentioned, do seek to mimic the requirements of the incentive housing zone, which was, in fact, a recommendation of the affordable housing plan, in that they require fewer affordable units to be set aside for purposes of this development, allow for higher income limits in order to achieve or qualify for the density bonus at your discretion. As is the case with incentive housing zones, the intent is to provide, as I said, a viable alternative the developer is proposing higher density residential developments than that which they might otherwise achieve under Connecticut General Statutes 8-30G. So that's those provisions as it relates to section 10.6.9.
So before you get to the next section,
Just one
turn,
question.
Commissioner Alessi.
Thank you. I understand 17.5, 17.3, 6.10. What we're changing is elderly family development in 6.9?
As I mentioned, the current term, language that we use is to be occupied exclusively by elderly families.
Right.
In our opinion, and this is certainly, you're the final arbiter of this, you do have a defined term elsewhere in your regulations, 31.2.12, which defines an elderly family development, which I think is more representative of what we're talking about here.
Doesn't
And I think
have-
it's more-
doesn't have to be a family.
It doesn't have to be a family.
It's just an elderly family development.
Yep.
So that a single person could avail themselves.
Correct. You define as elderly family development, but it certainly could be elderly housing development,
Grandmother and his grandson.
could be that.
But
It-
could
Basically, the definition,
If the grandmother's over 55.
yes, you have to have at least one person that would meet the definition of elderly. I won't read into the record, you can all look at your own definition, but in my opinion, and I think the opinion of the committee, we would submit that this is a more all-inclusive term that we think should be substituted in lieu of a more ambiguous language that's currently there. But that's certainly for you to decide.
If a mother, a father, and a kid move in with an in-law, that's an elderly family, correct?
Well, again, this is specifically as it relates to an elderly development, restricted housing, age-restricted housing. That's what I would refer to it as.
Right.
Currently, age-restricted housing, we can provide a density bonus for age-restricted housing, for market rate housing. They could be, very high-end units. None of us would consider the least bit affordable. There's no provision. In order to receive what we see as a benefit, we're bestowing a benefit on the developer by providing a density bonus,
Right.
allowing them to build more units than they otherwise would. There should be, we believe, some ability to meet other town public policy goals, in this case, affordable housing. So that's where we draw the distinction. Currently, you provide for, you allow for market rate elderly housing developments to get a density bonus. We submit that there should be some provision for affordable housing in order to get that benefit.
When grandma's 98 years old and dies, what happens then?
If they meet the term of the age-restricted housing, I mean, there are definitions, restrictions in terms of age-restricted housing. Typically, as I said, one of the household members needs to be over the age of 55, I believe, in order to qualify.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah, we have Commissioner Barrett's first, and
Yeah.
then I'll go down the line.
Just want to make sure I understand the numbers correctly, Mr. Barnes. Seth, here's my characterization of the first proposal, that this proposal provides a 50% bonus, that's the incentive, if 20% of the units are affordable. That's the benefit. to the
Yes.
town. And it's a viable alternative to 830G. I see 830G as it's unlimited density, as long as it's safe, if 30% is affordable to provide.
30%, 15% at or below 60% AMI, and 15% at or below 80% AMI.
Right. And ours is only, this proposal is only 80%, so
Right.
it actually would provide, potentially more income to the developer also, because, the income or the rent or whatever, the price on some of the units could potentially be more.
Yes.
For the 80% AMI.
Yes.
Okay. So that's accurate, that's the way you assess it, as a viable alternative, that's how.
That's how we
that's
would
one of the
see
way
it.
we want to position this.
Right. At present, you need to be a set-aside development, meaning you have to meet all the provisions or terms of being a set-aside development under 8-30G in order to qualify for a density bonus. Well, if you're going to make an application under 8-30G, you don't really care as to whether or not you get a density bonus or not, because you're going to make an application
Well, you don't need it.
based on, you don't need it. It's based on the density that you feel is appropriate to meet the requirements. Obviously, it needs to be the interest of public health, safety, and welfare
Well, yeah,
can't be jeopardized, at least insofar as they outweigh the need for affordable housing. So,
Right, but here you're saying, if a normal calculation would be, I don't know, somebody wants to put in something that would normally determine, oh, they could put 16 units there, they could actually put 24 there under this plan, right, 50% density bonus, and out of the 24, 20%, or let's say 5 of them would have to be affordable. Is that how this would work?
well, as I read your regs, what I see as the maximum density currently under our provisions outside of the Commerce Drive area is 10 units, and a 50% density bonus would get us up to 15.
Okay.
There are some other interesting variations in there, provided that they're located within a quarter mile of exit, something or other off the highway type thing, but
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to clarify, that's a unit, you're talking units.
units.
I think you were just giving an example of
A project.
A project.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a particular building, I'm talking a project.
A project.
If a project was gonna have 16 units.
True.
Under this provision, it could have 24 if 5 were affordable.
Right.
That's how.
Right, I
numbers-
was talking about units per acre type.
Under 830G, if we said it could have 16 units, it could have, they could propose 80 units,
Right,
or whatever they thought they could fit them, so.
Right.
Yeah, depending on the density. So I'm just trying to understand how this is positioned as an alternative, and if I'm understanding the logic correctly.
yes,
Thank you.
you have it.
All right, and those units that are so designated would also count towards our calculations under the state statute?
Yes, yes.
Commissioner Jacobson?
Actually, Commissioner Barrett, that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Coleman?
Commissioner Barrett, that's my question.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
I'll talk last next time, I promise.
Okay.
Yes.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to just go over one more thing. I think it was said, but this proposal isn't introducing the 50% density bonus. That exists, right? So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. It presently exists, but there's no requirement for there to be an affordable component.
Right,
So the change here isn't the density bonus, it's the requirement for there to be an affordable component.
So now basically they get the bonus and they don't have to, they don't have to have anything.
Presently.
Presently.
Presently, they're entitled to the bonus.
Right.
But this
Because of
amendment would require a set aside.
I got it.
Okay? Yes, Commissioner Francis?
Elderly, is there a restriction against people under 21 or under 18?
Don't think it's
There doesn't
basically,
appear to be. in
yeah, your definition,
31-212.
Yeah, it's not in there.
I don't believe there is. It basically says, as I noted, that you have to have at least one person who is at least 55 years of age or older.
And so say you have someone 65, 40, and 12 or 15 or something, and the 65-year-old dies, do the other two people have to move out?
I don't know the answer to that question, but again, what I'm suggesting here tonight is not changing the fact you have current language that allows for elderly age-restricted housing. So those circumstances exist irrespective of this proposed amendment. The only change would be whether or not, just simply by virtue of proposing an age-restricted housing development, you qualify for a density bonus without any provision for affordable housing. So that's the change, as Mr. Wendt pointed out. That's the substance of the change. Put that there.
Anyone else have any questions on this section?
It doesn't really say so.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Again, I'll turn my attention now to our second recommendation, which is to amend Section 25.7 of the zoning regulations and Section 2 of the subdivision regulations to establish an inclusionary zoning provision. This amendment, if enacted, would require that any development project that would result in a net increase of 10 or more residential dwelling units set aside not less than 10% of those units as below market rate housing affordable to households earning not more than 80% of the area median income. So again, we're attempting to mirror language elsewhere in your regs, particularly as it relates to the similar requirement that the Commission established for residential developments within the transit-oriented development park, where such developments are required to set aside 10%, not less than 10%, as below market rate units. This change would extend this provision town-wide, provided the proposed development would meet that 10-unit threshold for inclusion. So smaller scale developments and subdivision applications of less than 10 units would not be affected and would be exempt or from this requirement. So the purpose of this proposed change is to ensure that proposed larger scale residential developments make some provision for affordable or below market rate housing in their development plans to meet the town's affordable housing goals. As you know, and I'll provide some information in the record so you have it, but according to the State Department of Housing, 2.24% of the town's housing stock is recognized as affordable housing. Now, we might all contest as whether or not there are other naturally occurring housing units out there and whether the state fully counts the units that we have, but that's what the state currently recognizes as our affordable housing stock. And as we all are painfully aware, under existing state law, municipalities having less than 10% of their housing designated as affordable must demonstrate that a rejection of an affordable housing development, set-aside development, is necessary to protect the public health and safety, and that these considerations outweigh the need for affordable housing within the community. Absent repeal or major changes to the statute, which seem unlikely, I know that Representative Kupchak is here, and she tried valiantly to make some changes to this statute this past legislative session. I know she'll certainly be trying again this year. Or the town's achieving the 10% mark, which, as we've talked about before, also seems highly unlikely. I don't think that's likely in most cases in the state. The only mechanism for relief from this burden, albeit temporary, is to accumulate enough points to qualify, apply for, and receive a moratorium. As Chairman Graffel mentioned, the proposal is consistent with the recommendations of the town's recently updated affordable housing plan. I know you're familiar with that work. We met with this board a couple times. You participated in a number of those hearings or attended those hearings and other workshops that we held. We appreciate your input in the process. We undertook that task, the Affordable Housing Committee undertook that task at the behest of the Board of Selectmen. As Chairman Graffel mentioned, it was an 18-month, very thoughtful, deliberative process, public process to update the plan. And among the action steps that were specifically enumerated in the final plan document that was presented to the board, the Selectmen was a recommendation the town adopt an inclusionary zoning regulation. So I also put in the record tonight excerpted copies of the Affordable Housing Plan. I know you've all probably received that previously, but I'll introduce it in the record, specifically the action steps that were called for. And this proposal seeks to implement this important policy recommendation. I think what we're looking for most importantly is that this change would allow the town to harness the private marketplace to help the town meet its affordable housing goals. I know all of you are familiar with the town's work in this area. The town's had a long and illustrative history of working to develop affordable housing, acting both on its own accord in partnership with various nonprofit groups and organizations. These projects typically rely upon grant funding or other subsidies, such as the donation of town-owned land, usually from multiple sources, to finance construction and other costs in order to meet those affordability goals. And because of this, they take a long time to develop. The town's experience with Greenfield Commons, a small 10-unit LOD development on Villa Avenue, is not uncommon, where it took 5 years from project initiation to final occupancy. And while I'm not suggesting that the town abandon those efforts, we're certainly going to do what we can to identify opportunities to create affordable housing It's clear that the private marketplace, for-profit developers, were not as dependent on these public sources of financing with their attendant requirements, are much more nimble and much more able to respond to market demands. And this change would allow the town to leverage those forces for projects that would otherwise meet with your approval to help meet the town's affordable housing goals, including our ability to apply for and receive a moratorium. So, with respect to a moratorium, under state statutes, communities can apply for a moratorium provided they accumulate a sufficient number of housing unit equivalency points. The calculation is based on a formula prescribed by statute. It requires housing unit equivalency points equivalent to 2% of the most recent census count of all dwelling units. So in our case here, because we're a fairly large community, doesn't really work to our advantage, we need 433 points. In last count, we're about halfway there, just over halfway there. But that doesn't include the Housing Authority's planned Pine Tree development, which was approved by this commission, and which I understand today just received a funding commitment from the state.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's great.
So that will be an important milestone as we move forward with this plan. So we all recognize that we're not going to get there overnight, but we need to be in a position to take advantage of those opportunities that are presented to us if we're going to achieve the goal. So we wanted to look back, because I anticipated the question, well, what is the impact of these changes? I mean, how many applications might we potentially see? And so with the help of your staff, we looked at basically the last 2 decades worth of subdivision applications and other housing development activity in town. And according to your records, there have been a little over 100 applications approved and built since the late 1990s, mid-1990s, the largest of which was the town subdivision application involving the former Navy housing site. So 26 lots, that was the largest subdivision application approved. So the vast majority were much smaller, as you probably well know. 65% involved 2 lots, which is the median. Not counting the Navy housing site, there were 4 subdivision applications that involved 10 or more lots, roughly 4% of the total. Had this inclusionary provision been in place, it would have resulted in 7 additional units of below market rate housing. So it's not a lot. Looking at other housing developments during the same span, again with the help of your staff, we identified 4 non-set-aside, non-8-30G application compliant developments that were approved and involved 10 or more units. Only 3 of which are either built or are presently in construction, totaling just over 100 units. So again, doing the math there, again, if we set aside not less than 10%, it's 11, 12 units. Most of the new housing permit activity that we've seen are for single-family, single-lot homes, taking into account tear-downs. Net new housing construction has been averaging less than 50 units per year during this 2-decade span. The point I'm trying to make is that the impact is limited, and it only affects a small minority of larger scale developments, which we think is appropriate. Now, I suppose the counter argument to that is, well, if it's so limited, why bother, right? Well, I would argue that precisely because it is so limited in its breadth and scope, and these opportunities don't come around that often, it's vitally important that we position ourselves to take advantage of those few opportunities that do present themselves, since they don't come around all that often. And we know currently that there's a lot of demand for rental apartment developments. We haven't seen that many applications yet, but we know that this is a very robust housing market, and there's a lot of interest in developing new housing that might fall within these guidelines. So we do think it's important that we have this tool in place so that we can, again, hopefully make some progress toward meeting our goals and hopefully provide at some point some relief to 8-30G, some of the applications we would otherwise not like to be looking at or considering. So in conclusion, the proposal would allow us to expand housing opportunities to meet the needs of our residents, particularly those that have more modest needs that might otherwise be priced out of the local housing market. It would do so in such a way as to not disadvantage any particular neighborhood or area, but rather it allows the market to act as it would, to distribute units equitably as part of mixed income development. So it's not, we're not talking about these are the affordable, the projects, the affordable housing development over here. It's part of the mixed income community. And it would happen as market demand dictated. I think I also want to stress that it would not require the construction of new housing. So this in and of itself doesn't create new housing. It doesn't confer as of right status or require that you approve such developments that fail to satisfy other requirements of your zoning regulations. It doesn't in any way diminish the Commission's power, authority, or discretion to act on these applications. What it does do is it imposes an additional requirement the developers would need to meet if their development, their residential development, was more than 10 units in size. So it stipulates that in that event, that a residential development is proposed that meets that 10-unit threshold, then the applicant needs to make some provision for affordable housing in its application to this commission. And we think that's a worthwhile change. So I'm happy to respond to any questions that the commission may have.
Mr. Barnhart, I just want to briefly just explore your premise that the market rate approach leads to an equitable distribution of affordable housing in the town of Fairfield. My question for you would be this. Under this approach, wouldn't it seem more likely that increasing the amount of affordable housing in multi-unit dwellings, multi-unit developments would tend to end up having the additional affordable housing in sections of town that already are zoned more appropriately for those areas, say areas closer to commercial districts, areas in which the residential plots might be smaller, say Residence A or B or that kind, as opposed to, say, AAA zoning or AA zoning. It would seem that the idea that market rate ensuring an equitable distribution of where this new, I mean, admittedly small, but at least according to what you are describing to us, but where this new potential affordable housing would go in town. Is that correct? I mean, I'm not likely to build an apartment complex on, in Greenfield Hill,
If you subscribe to the theory that those applications that are higher density are already more likely to occur in areas that buffer commercial areas or in areas that already permit higher density, yeah, I would tend to agree.
So it's likely if we approve this, that we do increase the likelihood that there will be not an equitable distribution based on market forces throughout the town of Fairfield in terms of where the affordable housing would go, but rather we would increase somewhat the market pressure to develop likely affordable housing, more affordable housing in areas where you were more likely to see multi-family units.
I don't know if I would agree with
Really?
the statement that would increase the market pressure, because if anything, I think it's arguable that that this would impose an additional requirement the developers would need to satisfy, and there is a financial cost to that. So I think that there would be some consideration as to whether or not projects would pencil out. So to the extent to which they're viable to begin with and they're likely to occur, this doesn't, I don't think, increase the likelihood that you're going to see more applications. What it would do
That's
is...
not what
Okay,
I'm asking.
then I must admit...
Yeah, I apologize. Let me try to be clear what I'm saying so that you don't answer that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is I'm not going to go out and buy a block of turf in Greenfield Hill in some AAA zone to build my multifamily building. I'm going to look in neighborhoods where that's more likely to be available. And I'm going to get my density bonus to build a bigger multifamily building by building more affordable housing. And it does seem that the contention that the market rate approach will somehow equitably distribute where any new affordable housing will go, will be equitably, meaning that all communities in Fairfield, all neighborhoods in Fairfield will see the same level of market interest for multifamily, and therefore more affordable units that you're going to attach to that, is very unlikely. Would be that a fairer statement than to say that the market forces are going to make this the market forces will allow this to be more equitably distributed?
I think the market will dictate where it's most appropriate to locate those, And I don't think the additional requirement that you set aside 10% of those units if your development is over 10 units would change those market forces. But you're right that I would think that higher density developments are more likely to occur where we currently allow for higher density developments.
And so that would mean that there would be more potential affordable housing in those higher density applications.
But we wouldn't, but I would want to just talk a little bit about the density bonus, because that's a separate thing altogether.
Well,
So-
I would just make sure I'm clear, because
Yes.
maybe I want to misunderstand what
Okay.
you're doing. If before I had a density bonus that I was entitled to already under our regulations of 50% if I was doing elderly affordable housing.
Right.
Now, there will be also the requirement of this component of affordability, right?
If you're going to do,
Right.
yes.
That if we
If
approve
you have
this.
more than 10 units.
So if I was thinking about building, 30 units before in some section of town where I thought it was appropriate, and now I get 50% more if it's just for elderly, if it's an elderly development, but now I'll have this additional requirement by making this change, if I vote for that, which is the requirement to do, do a set aside.
We would
for
set the
affordable.
floor at 10%. Right.
Commissioner Jacobs.
Okay, I do have a few questions. Thank you very much for all of
Microphone.
your, pardon?
Microphone.
Thank you very much for all of your hard work. I do have a few questions. On 10.6.1, I'm assuming that where it says with a minimum of 30 acres, that's a typo and you meant 3?
I don't, 10.6.1.
It's just a
Did I change 10.6.1?
10.6.1. And each unit shall have a minimum of 30 acres.
I'm not sure that we proposed any changes to your existing regulations as relates to 10.6.1.
Oh, okay.
So if there's a typo in there that,
Oh, it's a typo, okay.
I think it says each lot shall have a minimum of 30 acres if you're in a AAA zone. So that's your current regulatory scheme. Yep.
Oh, that's,
For a design residential district.
okay. Okay. The other question I have is, what's to stop a developer, say, in a AAA or a AA zone? Would it be economically feasible or better for him to build 9 houses and not 10? Starting, but I know, so if he built 9 houses, he wouldn't have to comply with this without penalty. Or if, I don't know.
You may end up with, if they're on the cusp, there certainly would be, that would be something that I would think any developer would consider, whether or not it made sense financially to push the envelope and add additional units if they were then going to have to comply with this provision. So that's a possibility.
Did the committee give any thought, I'm sure you did, of making the limit less, like maybe 5 units? Or is that too small? I mean, I just don't see any way this is going to be more equitably distributed with these.
Well, we did consider the threshold question and looked at what other communities have done both in the state as well as outside the state of Connecticut. And there's quite a range. Some communities do go below 10 units. We thought that some go above. We thought that 10 units was an appropriate cutoff because what we were looking at was not so much the smaller 10, 11 lot subdivision or development, but more so that somebody might then play a little bit of gamesmanship with that to duck it below, but more so the 50-unit development that might be before you.
So this in reality will not distribute the housing more fairly because...
Well, I think it goes directly to a claim that has been advanced by some that I don't subscribe to, that the town, either through its actions or inaction, is placing affordable housing in certain areas or neighborhoods of town. I don't believe that. I believe we provided ample evidence to contest that, but certainly a provision that allows the market to dictate where those housing units get developed and provides for this provision town-wide, I think effectively counters that argument.
Right.
So that's what I mean by equitable distribution. Now, of course, anytime you do this, the market is not equitable in some respects, and they're going to make a determination as to where developers are looking at, where they can do a project that eventually will provide a return on their investment. All I'm suggesting in this instance is, I think the committee is advancing a proposal to you that in those instances where they're proposing a fairly larger scale development of more than 10 units, we think that's a larger scale development in the sense of the word Fairfield, that there should be some provision to set aside some units to meet our affordable housing goals and help us meet our requirements. That's it.
That's it.
I mean,
Regardless of where that is in town.
regardless of where it is,
And they were gonna get the 50% bonus anyway, and so now, in order to get that, to get the over 50% bonus, you gotta have some set aside, and an alternative incentive to simply foregoing the whole thing and making application under 830G.
But,
sorry.
I know this would be something the RTM would have to do, so if the threshold's gonna be 10, was any thought given to possibly establishing where the developer would have to pay, say, 20% of what one of the houses would cost towards a fee?
well,
Darien does.
yes, yeah, there
You know,
was.
and that way the town could refurbish and fix houses.
Actually, I believe that would be within your discretion. I mean, there
I
are
just felt-
communities that do establish a fee in lieu of option. We considered that. We thought that this was the better approach. It's both in terms of complexity. It obviously amps it up in terms of what is a fair allocation of what. I mean, we could come up with a formula, I'm sure, because other communities have certainly done this. And then the question is whether, that in the end produces, just because we're able to, take some money from a developer as a fee in lieu, will people opt for that? Always, who has the discretion? Is that with the commissioner, with the developer? It goes into a fund, and then is that fund used for its,
Similar
does it
to
sit
what we
there, or
did
does
with
it
the
actually
land
produce a
acquisition.
unit? So,
Yeah.
again, I think our thought was, if we're going to try to get over at least a threshold that would get us in a position to qualify for a moratorium, we need to actually produce units. And so a fee in lieu is not necessarily equivalent to actually production of units themselves. And we thought that this made more sense. But certainly other communities that go on a different direction have looked at that as an option, a fee in lieu option.
Commissioner
I have
Barrett?
one more question.
No.
When we did the transit-oriented development district, which has worked out well, there was thought given to expanding it to say where Pepe's is or up into Grassmere. Was that given any thought? Expanding the transit-oriented district?
Certainly that is another option. I mean, what you did in there was not only provide an inclusionary element, you said that if you're going to propose a residential development within this overlay district or overlay zone, you're going to at least set aside not less than 10%. You did recognize that it's close to transit, so you were able to support higher levels of density there, and in that case, you bestowed some additional benefit to folks proposing that, developers proposing applications there by allowing, up to 50 bedrooms per acre. Again, that was a consideration as we look at how inclusionary zoning provisions are implemented in other communities. Some communities have provided some offset, recognizing that there is a financial cost to developer by requiring developers to set aside 10% or 20% or whatever the percentage is, by providing some flexibility in the regs. We didn't go there. I think, again, we see the 10% as kind of a floor. Certainly, there could be additional consideration by this board in the future as to replicating or expanding the transit-oriented overlay zone around Commerce Drive or elsewhere, and providing for some offsets for higher percentages of affordable units as an offset. So, those are all important policy considerations, but In both cases, the committee is recommending to you straightforward, not less than 10% for developments over 10 with no fee in lieu option, and there is currently no provision for any, I guess, benefit bestowed to developer to help offset those additional costs. And part of it, our thinking was that 10% is a fairly modest figure. It replicates the percentage at the state level in terms of the 10% goal, and that the market will be able to respond to that modest expectation without need for additional benefits.
Thank you. Commissioner Barrett?
Sorry.
That's okay. I did call the zoning office in Darien, and they said they've had a fee in lieu of office, a fee in lieu in place for quite a while, and they say that, I mean, I don't want to speak for the builders, but they say that the builders really just live with it. Is that because, I don't know why, but they said they don't really have a problem with the builders, you know?
In some cases, I would think a developer would prefer paying a fee rather than providing the units on site.
Exactly, that's what they said.
So the question again is, what is our intent to produce units that we could then use to help meet our requirements and put into an application for a moratorium, or is it, I think when you have a fee, you obviously then take the money, you have the money obviously, then help identify land that you can then develop for affordable housing, but that obviously takes
Or
time.
rehab houses, or,
Well, that fund then needs to be administered, and the land needs to be identified, the project needs to be built,
Mhm, yeah.
and so this
And
is
then-
an incremental step towards, achieving actual units.
okay, I'm finished.
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I think I was different. We're talking about the second set of amendments. Now, I understand the first set was about density bonus. I see this, this is a requirement. This has nothing to do with a bonus. This is a 10% requirement,
Yes.
and I see the practical application of this, or the rationale I'm trying to understand for doing this is, we established this 10% mark in the transit-oriented development zone. And the idea here is to expand that 10% all across town, regardless of where, any place that anybody's going to put in 10 new units, more than 10 units, regardless of what kind of units, they would have to put 10% affordable. Yes, that's what this is intended. And I see 25, the section 25, which is the special permit, that's dealing more with whatever, mixed use, commercial, residential, anywhere somebody's going to do it. That's usually not in residential districts, right? And then the subdivision, I understand that, as you pointed out, there's not many. There have been many developments over 10 units, as much as we hear about subdivisions. I don't think we've had one in 12 years. I think the last one was Duck Farm that I can remember off that inventory, so.
No,
Sorry.
What's that?
There are not that many.
You have
You're
another
right.
one?
Statistic was 4 in the last 20-plus years.
420. Campfield Drive is not a residential subdivision. That's a thing. I mean, the second one just deals with residential subdivisions, because we have to amend our subdivision regs. That's saying somebody's putting anything anywhere more than 10 units. You don't see a lot in any zone. Actually, not even so much in the A or B zones, because we've gotten up to 7, but not
You
too
just
many.
don't
That's
have-
correct,
the
or-
land
It's just
doesn't
not, the
exist.
land doesn't exist. So
Right.
I agree with you, Mr. Barnhart. I don't think the incremental value will be, but the rationale there is expand this 10% to any development anywhere across town. Is that?
Provided it meets that 10-unit threshold.
And which is also why it's not incentive to locate the density in a particular area of town, and is the reverse of what you were arguing.
No, that's not true at all, because you're not going to see high-end developments of more than 10 units anywhere in the neighborhoods I was describing, where I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't know what you're saying.
Okay.
Whatever.
I don't think you're going to see them in any neighborhood, because you don't see.
If you're going to see them, you see them on the east side of the
Maybe so, but when we're talking about neighborhoods, I'm sorry, we shouldn't be debating this now. Apartments don't go in neighborhoods. This is, so I'm not really seeing it in the residential districts. Parts of town is another story, but, so you've got 25 that applies to really any project, and then the subdivision applies to the actual residential subdivision.
Yes, right.
And that's
That's why, in terms of simplicity, we looked at amending Section 25, because that basically is one of those special requirements that
Yeah.
you need for other developments. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly interested to hear from the public or whoever later on about why this might kind of encourage development. I'm just trying to understand the text of the regulations that you're proposing and the rationale for doing so.
Yes.
And that, I think I've kind of got that correctly. My understanding is.
What you stated to me is what my, yes,
Thank you,
correct.
Mr. Barnhart.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions for Mr. Barnhart?
I'll sit down.
Thank you very much. Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? Yes, come on up.
Good evening, Alan Marks, 1213 Fairfield Woods Road. I'm also a member of the RTM. I am here just to speak in favor of these proposals. You as commissioners are on the front line of what's been happening in terms of development and 830G, and nobody likes to have the control taken out of your hands. And I think that these proposals give us some tools, as Mr. Barnhart said. We have asked the Affordable Housing Committee to come up with proposals to help with this problem. They have done that. They've brought forth 2 of them. I think they're worthy of your consideration, and I hope you will give them that serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Yep.
Good evening. So who doesn't want affordable housing, right?
Can you just introduce...
Oh, I'm sorry,
yourself?
Lauren O'Brien, District 5, RTM rep. So who doesn't want affordable housing, right? I think, who doesn't want the best for our elderly either? One of the reasons why I'm here this evening. I think I speak for all of my constituents. I know I speak for myself and the person that came to me and asked me to come to speak before this commission this evening. To Mr. Barrett's point, apartment buildings don't go up in neighborhoods. I think the people on Fairchild Avenue where the fire was a couple days ago, in the apartment building, would be surprised to hear you say that.
I'm sorry, that's an 830G application.
It's an apartment building.
I understand that.
That's the point.
That's
is
the point of
that
it.
doesn't have to comply with any of our regulations.
Just a comment. I didn't say anything about the regulations. I'm just saying apartment buildings go up in neighborhoods. They are right now.
Not under our regulations.
Okay.
Right.
Let me continue. The effort to amend Fairfield zoning regulations to encourage the development of additional affordable housing is commendable. The changes to 10.25 are logical, sequential, and build on what we, the town of Fairfield, have already publicly vetted and approved. Specifically, any building of 10 units or more will have 10 affordable units, as in the transit-oriented district. However, the Affordable Housing Committee proposed amendments to zoning regulations 10.6.9-10.17.5 contain language in the proposed 10.6.9 amendment that appear inappropriate. Mr. Barnhart asked, why would we ever regulate a minimum number of bedrooms? The proposed revision does not restrict occupancy to 2 persons, nor does it require a minimum unit size. Without the existing restrictions of occupancy by 2 persons and a minimum size of 450 square feet, a development approved under the proposed regulations would be prone to overcrowding. The propensity and desire of builders to maximize any lots, building maximum...
You understand that the proposal would need to comply with all of our other regulations, right?
Pardon?
You understand that the proposal would need to meet all of the other regulations in our...
So you're saying that they're not, well, I believe I do, and if I can just read through it, perhaps we could expedite it. I don't want to belabor the time I'm up here. So without the existing regulations of occupancy by 2 persons and a minimum size of 450 square feet, a development approved under the proposed regulations, as I understand them, would be prone to overcrowding. the propensity and desire of builders to maximize any available lots, building a maximum square footage and occupancy opportunity has come before the commission time and time again, as have I. In a 2007 report measuring overcrowding in housing, the Department of Housing and Urban Development stated, overcrowding would occur when there is less than 160 square feet per person. HUD also recommended that the ratio of people to bedrooms not exceed 2. The proposed changes to Regulation 10.6.9 ignore the HUD guidelines and would allow overcrowding. I'll cite a second reference. The Encyclopedia of Housing, 2nd edition, Andrew T. Carswell, states, square footage is a tangible measure of crowding and is important when considering airborne disease. The reason that, all else held constant, human proximity is the key to disease transmission and also defines an overcrowding standard of 165 square feet per person. Additionally, that particular text cites the HUD report saying that the number of rooms desired in new housing and required based on codes reflect societal standards, and that has resulted in significantly lower rates of crowding. However, for the 2.5 million households classified as crowded, the negative impacts can affect their physical and psychological health and limit the development of youth in the household. I just question, does that sound like the Fairfield we've worked so hard to build and build well? I do not want to be an elected official or part of a town government that approves sub-living conditions for our residents, and that includes seniors in tiny, tiny apartments. Then in retrospect, people will question, how did that ever get approved in our town? Who let this happen? The proposed change to 10.6.9 may result in the construction of a development that is filled with tiny units or units occupied by several persons who would have less than the minimum living space recommended by HUD. Such living arrangements would be outside the desired quality of life we strive to provide our residents and not in keeping with the character of a town like Fairfield. Furthermore, it may run counter to health and fire safety. In its clarification of proposed changes, the Affordable Housing Committee concedes that changes to 10.6.9-10.17.5 were not included in the report it presented to town bodies and to the public. I respectfully request that this very important function of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, leveraging opportunity to hear public comment, be extended to the next scheduled meeting when a considerable percentage of Fairfield residents are not delivering children to college, enjoying the last 2 weeks of summer, and away on vacation. It's kind of the dead of summer, and as you can see, there's not very many people here. These changes to 10.6.9-10.17.5 should be rejected, and the Affordable Housing Committee should be asked to place these proposed changes through full and open discussion by the public and by appropriate town bodies before modifying and submitting them to your commission. Thank you.
So what you're saying is you don't want to change 2 bedrooms. You want to leave it as 2 bedrooms.
No, I don't think that it should be unspecified. So as it stands now, there isn't a minimum, the number of people isn't, as I understand it, the number of people is not clearly defined, and the size is not clearly defined. Do I have that wrong?
No, it's at the bottom of 10.6.9, it's been cut. What's being removed is the not more than 2 per person per unit, and to the conversion of existing structure, the minimum unit size shall not be more.
Use your microphone, please.
What the representative is referring to, Vice Chairman, is this. The bottom of 10.6.9, what would be deleted from our current regulations is this. This is to be deleted, but not more than 2 persons per unit, and as to the conversion of existing structures, the minimum unit size shall not be less than 450 square feet for not more than 2 persons.
So that's being taken out.
Yeah.
That's concerning to me.
Why?
Because you're going to open the door to builders. I toured some of the new construction in town. I was claustrophobic without furniture. You're going to cram any number of people in units that are any size that the builder desires them to be. And I fear, we're focusing on seniors. I totally appreciate the dichotomy between where we are and where we need to be. And that 10% is a number that is almost mathematically impossible to hit, because as we grow, it's going to get further away from us. I appreciate the challenge. However, I feel that it's my job as an elected official to speak for all my constituents, and I don't want seniors or anyone shoved in a tiny little apartment with a whole bunch of people. It's not healthy, and I mean, these health standards are very basic, and HUD outlines what size. So who are we as local town officials to go against what HUD is saying is
But we're not.
a good size? You're taking it out, though.
Other regulations exist such that what you're saying could happen, can't.
But why are we taking it out of this? Why are we taking out the specification for the number of people and the size?
Not more than 2, so this was a limitation on the number of people who could occupy, and it makes it an elderly family development such that there can be more people who live in a particular dwelling, such as was described earlier, a grandmother with yeah, and relatives with a young child, perhaps.
Understood.
Okay, so that with that last clause, those units would not be considered an elderly set-aside under our current regulations. There are other regulations in place which would not allow the kind of development and crammed quarters that you're describing.
Debate this. I'm sorry.
And I wasn't going to debate this. I wasn't going to debate this, you know, in this setting. Okay. But you know,
I think you're...
Commissioner Barron.
May I go?
Yes, please.
I think that comments are taken about why deleting the minimum square foot. I think we can address that. I would just encourage you and all of the commissioners to understand like what we're doing. You don't understand what part of the regulations we're talking about. This part is talking about section 10. That's the design residence district. All right, for the district that allows multi-unit development in any district. I go back to the beginning, which Commissioner Jacobs said that is not a typo, what you pointed out before. There are limitations in every district as to the maximum density. That is our regulation. Anything built in any district first complies with that. This proposal has bonuses on top of that. For example, in the A zone, you have a maximum unit density in this of 6.9 units per acre. Okay, and each unit lot shall have a minimum 1 acre. So there's already controls over how. This is offering a density bonus. I understand your point about the minimum lot size, but let's not
It's not
get
lot
confused.
size, minimum floor area.
Minimum floor area, right,
Floor.
right. But
Okay.
there are already lot size and dwelling units. This application, I'm not trying to defend it, I'm just trying to make sure it's well understood, is to change our existing regulations which already control what can be built.
Right, and it simply adds a requirement that if you take advantage of this 50% bonus, that you will also provide this set-aside.
Any other questions for me? Thank
No.
you.
Thank you. Yes, come on up.
My name's Amy Mezoff. I'm from 261 Rapin Lane. I wanted to be sure that the commission received my email and Catherine Braun's email today, as well as Mr. Went's answer to it.
We did.
We did.
You did? Okay. I would love it if it wasn't so late and Mr. Wagner could go back to read,
No,
from...
it's not late. Our curfew is at 11 o'clock. We got an hour and 15.
Yeah, but you guys look like you're going to sleep. I can't blame you.
You really think I'm...
No,
I
you
look
don't.
like I'm-
Mr. Alessi just really
Really?
looks tired.
That might be the first time anybody accused me of going to sleep up here.
No, I wouldn't do that. I would love for you to be able to go back and read, the words mean what they say, but you have the capacity to change the regulations, and that is true. What I raised in my emails, and I'll be very brief, is simply that I believe that there have been instances where this Affordable Housing Committee has exceeded its charge. I was as clear as I could be. Catherine Braun gave you some case law. You don't have to agree with it. Obviously, you just heard the presentation, so we're already past the point where you know, that's entirely relevant. However, there's been a few precedents that have been set by this committee, and I think that it needs to be taken into account if they are asking you to make changes. One of those is that by endorsing one of the 830G buildings, effectively, the town appealed it, and yet the developer used that against the town, that there was an endorsement from the Affordable Housing Committee. I think that also exceeds the charge. There are other instances I don't need to get into right now, but I think you need to take into account that this committee has a charge. It is in the code. It was put there in 2007, not 1910. I'm going to end there. I just think that you have to take into account whether there's a committee that's exceeding its charge, and I'm sorry, I'm tired. I just got this afternoon, so I didn't have very much time to really go over my notes. And I've raised this issue before, and I will raise it again, and until the code gets changed, I don't see how an application to change regulations is the same as a recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
I just would say to you, obviously, you were involved in those first workshops.
Just introduce yourself.
Oh, Brenda Kupchik, Ferris Road State Representative, ranking member on the Housing Committee. We tried really valiantly to get the statute changed this year, and we were actually able to get a bill out of the Housing Committee. First time in 25 years, an 8-30G bill was actually voted out of the Housing Committee and was on the House calendar, was on the Senate calendar. I don't think I can begin to describe to you the level of politicism with this statute. It is incredibly political. And we worked behind the scenes in closed-door meetings with housing advocates, myself as a ranking member and the co-chairs of the Housing Committee for months, hammering out some language for this bill that we agreed on, things that we wanted, things that they wanted. The bottom line is, it's not an easy thing to amend this regulation. It's incredibly...
Not an easy thing to amend the state
to amend the
statute
8-30G regulation. And when I tell you that the bill that we did have passed out of committee and on the Senate calendar did small, very minor changes, nothing sweeping, that makes massive changes that within a couple years Fairfield's going to be in a moratorium. But it got us a little closer. So my point to you is the Affordable Housing Committee has been in existence a long time, and obviously the fire was lit under them when all of these applications came before you, and the residents of this community became very enraged with 50-unit developments and 100-unit developments being proposed before your commission. And the only options you had were to reject them for safety, period. So I think it's worth looking at making some changes to your rules to get us closer. Because frankly, the comments that we get a lot from, I would say, urban legislators who defend the current statute in the way that it is written is that Fairfield's doing nothing to increase its affordable housing. And why should we do anything to help you? And I was even told by urban legislators in the hallway, we shouldn't give a carrot to towns like yours to increase affordable housing. We should hit you over the head with a hammer and make you increase your affordable housing. So I'm just trying to give you a layout of what it's like and what it means to people to increase affordable housing in more suburban communities. So if slight changes to the statutes give our town more counts, give us affordable housing counts that we can use toward a moratorium, I think that's a good thing. Now, as far as the comment that the RTM member brought up, about minimum requirements of, I mean, I know there's housing code requirements, and HUD does have strict requirements. So regardless of how you change your zoning laws, any housing development has to abide by HUD standards.
No,
You
of course.
can't,
So you don't-
right, you can't just cram people in. So I didn't have a chance to completely read everything, but I think when we're talking about any development, 10 units or more, we should have something in place that gives us a few more units. And we've all participated. We participated in the workshops with the committee. Mark Barnhart knows about this issue from when he was the town manager in Stratford, and Stratford was always on the forefront with the 8-30G statute problem. He has a lot of experience in this issue. I think it's worth taking a look at, trying to tweak our standards, maybe making it a little easier to increase our affordable housing stock on our own, because frankly, Mark's right. We don't have a whole lot of land left in the town. We're not building like we used to with the Greenfield apartments, and when we did things like that, the town was working to increase our affordable workforce housing. We're not doing things like that as much, and clearly not enough to get us to where we need to be. So I think it's worth consideration, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yeah.
Hi, Ellen Jacob, RTM District 9. I'm just wondering if this is too much, too soon. Several of us in the RTM, and many of, or several of them are actually here, as well as Fairfield residents who were concerned about this issue, were active participants in the Affordable Housing Committee meetings, the public hearings, and the community housing workshop that were held prior to the final Affordable Housing Report and the recommendations that were made last October. And I have to say, Steve and Mark and the committee were very gracious and very patient. They welcomed us. We felt listened to. We felt heard, and they were happy to answer lots of questions. However, I'm standing here tonight because I'm a bit shocked at the proposals that are being offered, the extensive changes involved. And the reason I'm shocked is not so much that they were proposed, but they seem to be first out. There were so many voices heard at these hearings. Many of them did not want to see vast changes done quickly. And I do think that the public, my constituents, are way behind you and them and their proposals in terms of understanding what they mean. I think I'm behind too, and I've been working at it. What they mean, what the long-term impact would be, how the town would look, what the people who are already here might see when they drive down the street 5 years from now, if all of this goes through so fast. So I'm wondering how we got from these proposals or some ideas of doing this, which were presented 7th out of the 11 action items in the final report, and they end up showing up first. Or it seems that if you ask the average sidewalk sale shopper down the street this week or last week, are they in favor of inclusionary zoning, you'd probably get a blank look. I mean, most people who live here don't even know what that means. And if you asked people stuck in traffic on Mill Plain Road at 5 o'clock.
Excuse me, what are you actually opposed to in what's being proposed?
I think that it's
No, what specifically don't you like in the proposal?
I feel that
as I said, too much, maybe too much too soon.
But what? What?
Okay, too much maybe encouragement of density.
We're not adding density.
Well, I know, but what would the ultimate impact be if you encourage
So let's
these
just
things
take,
so
let's
soon?
just take the 10.6.9 as an example, okay? So presently, a developer that has a proposal for 10 or more units gets an automatic 50% bonus on density, okay? That is in our existing regulations. It's been
Which
there
now
for a
I
long time,
understand, yes,
okay?
yeah.
This amendment would require that developer to provide for a certain number of those units to be set aside as elderly family developments as affordable housing at 80% of AGI, which differs fairly substantially from the Connecticut General Statute 830G, which would provide for a greater number of units that would be at 60, 40, 60, and 80, okay? Okay? So the net effect of 10.6.9 would merely require that developer to provide for certain number of units to be set aside as affordable housing. The regulations do not allow for any greater density whatsoever.
I understand that. I guess what I'm feeling I don't understand is, are there other possible side effects by encouraging...
What? All we're doing is we're saying that you have to make so many affordable. That's all we're saying.
The proposal does not encourage any further, encourage is not even the right word. They don't allow or provide a mechanism for any greater density.
What it's saying is that where there's going to be density, there's going to be a requirement for affordable housing. So what you would seem to be opposed to is the fact that where there is more dense development, that there will now be a requirement for additional affordable housing that would have been required otherwise, which is what this proposes.
But okay, so I understand that, but if we followed a little bit of Commissioner Kennelly's thoughts earlier in the evening...
Please don't conflate what I was saying with the idea that I think that there's more density being proposed here. I don't to say that. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying, Representative Jacobs, is that where in town, the unintentional effect I'm concerned about, and where I want to debate this, but since we're all talking to the public tonight, is where there is,
Feel free.
Well, yeah, everyone else did, yeah.
Feel free.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Where there is already the likelihood of more density, there now will also be a requirement for affordable housing. Do you understand?
Yeah.
In other words, are you likely to build in Greenfield Hill denser properties? Probably not, based on market forces. Where might you be? Maybe somewhere on the east side of town, for example. But as a result of requiring now to have this affordable housing, it just means that where there could be more dense development, there will now be a requirement as part of that dense development to have some affordable housing in it. So that would mean where there's more dense development, there'll be more affordable housing.
That's it.
Okay, I understand. Okay, just the last point I wanted to make is that in their memo of June 15th, they stated that these zoning changes would help out the needs of our residents who might be in need, seniors, people, veterans, young people. But my understanding is that if it is in any way state-funded, that it can't be earmarked for our own residents, that it does have to be used, or the applicants must come from all over the state.
No, that's correct. I think you're reading into the cover note a little bit too much by suggesting that it be restricted to residents. It's not. The regulations that exist, and even as proposed to be amended, relate to the development of units, let's just call them units, in the town of Fairfield. Those units could be sold or rented to anyone
Anyone.
from any state or any country, anywhere, in compliance with all of our state and federal laws regarding, discrimination and all that stuff. Okay? So they're not in any way restricted to a type of tenant or buyer, except that certain number of set-asides would be age restricted under the elderly family development definition of our regulations. It's already a defined term in our regulations.
And our residents would have as good a chance as anybody, if they were in need, to take advantage of the affordable units?
Of course, and I think that the implication in the Affordable Housing Committee's comments is that because they would be built in our town, that they would be more readily available to our residents. Our residents would know about them, they would be advertised locally, and that, so we would be seeking to assist Fairfield residents in staying in town. As they age, there would be more units available that would be more affordable under the 80% category.
Okay.
So not restricted, because we can't do that.
Yeah, okay, that was the confusion, thank you.
Sure, just give me a minute. Come on.
My name is Bob Frigo. I am a member of the Affordable Housing Committee, but I'm speaking as a resident. I've lived in Fairfield over 40 years, and to answer the comment about too much too soon, it's like too late, penny short. I mean, I'm just unhappy with, affordable housing is a major problem, and God, so I agree with Brenda's comment. I think these are reasonable steps to take it a little bit at a time to show that Fairfield is trying to do something on a very serious problem, which is shared by every other community in Fairfield County. So anyway, I appreciate your kudos for your vote on the Fitness Edge project development. I think it's the right thing for the community. So,
Commerce Drive. Took us a long time to get there. Does anyone else wish to be heard? Hold on. Does anyone else wish to be heard on this? Okay. Do you have a question?
I am in favor of affordable housing.
Really?
I am, in the right place and safely. Question is, through a conversation with a builder that put a unit up on Fairchild Avenue, he stated to me that he had advertised the availability to rent, not in Fairfield. And he detailed for me where he advertised. And is there anything we can put in so that it is offered to our residents first? Because that was not the case with that particular project. Can we do that?
So, I believe that the short answer is no. I believe. I'm not going to give a specific, I can't give a specific, and I don't know. But are you referring to one of the 830G developments on Fairchild? Or you are. So, under the state statute, they are specifically required to advertise in a certain manner, and they're required to file with the Affordable Housing Committee or the clerk of the CPZ, okay, with us, a report on how they've advertised and that they've complied with the statute and all that kind of stuff. So the example that you gave is in a posit. It doesn't apply.
The example
of this particular developer who built a development under 830G and who advertised in the manner that he did was doing so in compliance with the state statute. Your first comment when you first came up to the podium about the apartment buildings being built on that...
Which I wish I hadn't said.
Okay. It's completely in a posit because they weren't built under our regulations. Okay?
The comment was in reference to our changing real estate landscape and that
Yeah. And the
whoever
point
thought
is-
you'd buy a building in a residential, or a home in a residential area, and you
Yeah.
could have a building next to you, multi-story.
And the point here is to provide incentives for developers to develop under our regulations.
I appreciate
Which
that.
don't provide for greater density,
Mhm.
in contrary to your comments, so that they don't jump into 830G, which means that they can develop as dense as they want.
I understand
Without
that.
regard to our regulations, so long as they comply with certain health, fire, and safety standards. Okay? So, yes.
I've been at a lot of these meetings, and I could have been better prepared this evening, so I apologize. I went to New Haven and testified, and, well, Brenda was there. It's a big problem, I understand, and it's an urban, suburban problem that we're saddled with, and we have to ride this horse and figure out how we're going to do it. So I just wanted to know if there was the opportunity, or how we could make sure, I understand there's state regulations, how they have to advertise availability of properties that contain 830G units. I was floored when I talked to the builder, because he was frustrated with the process, and he let me know that he advertised it in another town and through different agencies, but not through us, is what was expressed to me, and it was concerning, perhaps not accurate.
Well, I can appreciate that, and,
Talk to Brenda.
we requested that there be some changes there.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask, Mr. Chairman, is it possible to address one more question to Mr. Barnhart before the public
Well,
hearing
yeah.
is closed? I mean,
You know what, we're
up
not
to you.
actually closing, because that was public comment, so
Oh,
he's coming back up to
okay, great,
reply, so
great.
we have a comment from Mr. Wendt.
I have a point of clarification to offer as well, but I'll do it.
Point of clarification. Thank you. I love these things.
I don't want to belabor the point about unit
Introduce yourself to the
size.
record.
My name is Jim Wendt, I'm your Assistant Planning Director. I just, while everybody's here, Representative O'Brien raised a question. It is confusing when you're looking at just a regulation segment as to what the overall ramifications are. It is true, I'll just say this, Section 10.13 of the Design Residence District Regulations, which is existing, that is remaining unchanged, specifies what the minimum floor area is already for dwelling units, and that's a minimum of 500 square feet. If you look at 10.6.9, there's a requirement that no more than 2 persons live in a unit, and then there's a comma that says, as to the conversion of existing structures, the minimum unit size shall not be less than 450 square feet and not more than 2 persons. That was a limited provision that allowed a less than 500 square foot unit that's actually proposed to be eliminated.
Right.
So in effect, it's going back to
The elimination of that provision means that now all dwelling units must be at least 500.
Correct.
And so it actually provides for a greater floor
Well,
area. And, okay. yeah.
I just
I just
again,
got the
we
thumbs
got-
up. I just got the thumbs up. Thank you. Okay? Thank you. So actually, the amendments reduce density, or the amendments have the possibility of actually reducing density. Yeah, maximum of 2, which
But the maximum of 2 before it was 450 with a maximum of 2. Now it's 500. Where's the maximum persons? How is, I'm just checking here.
Yeah.
Can I have 5 people in my 500 where I could have 2 in my 450 or not? Because then that wouldn't be increasing the density, at least per person.
Okay, great.
Well, what's the answer? Because we've had this on the books for a long time. Mr. Barnhart?
I was going to try to address that, I guess, as part of my rebuttal.
And in a much more common.
Well, I'll try. There are other, as was alluded to previously by several speakers here, I don't recall exactly who, but there are certainly other code requirements that all applications, all developments would need to comply with. And so the question here is whether or not occupancy restrictions belong in the zoning regulations. or whether they can be regulated in some other manner through housing code or other requirements. Certainly, I think there are more substantive issues that we're proposing here as to this issue, but we suggest that you might want to look at that, because maximum occupancy restrictions, if they're not supported by some kind of factual evidentiary record, and I don't know what the precise history behind it was, may be problematic, and that's all I'm going to suggest.
Problematic under federal housing law?
Under federal housing law. That's all I'm suggesting. And so I think there are other ways, and there was another speaker who alluded to HUD standards as to minimum square footage per person. That certainly, there's a lot of comfort in just falling back or relying upon those commonly accepted standards for minimum square footage for per person, which is a per person unit, so depending on how many people are in the unit, that's what you need in order to meet these minimum requirements, as opposed to our crafting our own that may or may not be supported by an evidentiary record. That's all, and I'll just leave it at that. But I think there are more substantive proposals that we've presented for your consideration. I don't want to necessarily get hung up on, maximum occupancy if you decide that that's something that is necessary, or
so that can go, and then
we can certainly live with it.
We could live with it gone. Mr. Chairman, I asked for I'd like to ask a question broadly about the committee and about his work, if I can. Thanks.
Please.
So here's the thing: everyone believes, and I agree, that as a matter of societal good, from the federal government on down, that all communities, regardless of socioeconomic status, have to embrace the idea and the concept that there be affordable housing, that there be a reasonable amount of affordable housing for citizenry, and to not ghettoize poverty. And as Representative Kupchak described, those concerned about these issues view Fairfield essentially as a monolith of suburban privilege, let's say, would probably be a good description. My question to you, though, is this. I don't think there's anyone here at this table or in the audience who doesn't understand that we have a responsibility to deliver affordable housing and that Fairfield has to do its part, is the way the law is written. What I'm concerned about is the means to this. And this, ultimately you're right. For now, I think this is a dribble. To be worked up overly about this, the initial results of this, I don't think is worthwhile. What I'm concerned about, my anxiety, is this, and I want to ask you, as somebody who's worked with the Affordable Housing Committee about this. It's the means, and here's what I mean. The structure that is being proposed, that has been sold from the state level on down, and we're looking to somewhat expand, is a market-driven one. And the committee clearly focused on that approach, the market-driven one. My concern, as I've described already, I won't reiterate at length, but is that market-driven approach, to some extent, I think, does drive probably whatever units you get to be in areas where the market is more likely to allow them. We kind of accept that idea. But you dismissed, and others dismissed, Commissioner Jacobs raising the issue of fees for developers who would pay fees in lieu of doing affordable housing. Now, what I've wondered about is this, and I'm asking you this as a question, is whether the committee seriously thought about rethinking the way it was going to approach how all of Fairfield was going to embrace this ideal of affordable housing. Because it strikes me that if we, instead of having an approach like that's being described here, which really we all acknowledge won't do much to get us to 1,700 units, that'll get us to 10% of all households we need, we're not even close. So this isn't going to, this approach isn't going to remotely address the problem. It won't get us to the moratorium. We're not even close. So if we're really going to do something about affordable housing that everyone believes is so important sitting up here and in the audience, did the committee, working with you, consider the possibility of a completely different structure for Fairfield, one in which we asked developers to pay for development to pay significant fees toward an affordable housing trust, and then the town did, although it would be slow going, the town would then develop a structure where it would have to some extent, democratically decide by the vote of the RTM or by other bodies in town to find land to build affordable housing, and that perhaps there would be limitations to where one neighborhood or another, or one section of town or another, could absorb X number of units before other sections of town had to absorb those units. Was there ever any consideration of maybe a more of a governmental approach rather than a market approach here locally, one that would involve fees, one that would involve the town re-energizing the effort to purchase land, and to make an effort so that where those purchases were made would be reasonably distributed, so that all of us who support affordable housing would see to it that it was in every neighborhood in Fairfield? Because then there wouldn't be a market to have to worry about. We would simply have to decide, on a reasonable basis as a government, where we want to purchase land, where we want to build the housing, and we get some of those funds from the private developers, rather than who could then go on their way to build whatever market rate they were going to build otherwise. Instead, we have this approach. Was it ever considered to do something like that?
Yes.
Okay. And if it's too slow, how much faster is this going to get us?
May I fully address
Sure, go
your
right ahead.
comment? So I did pass out excerpt of the Affordable Housing Plan and the recommendation, the key action steps. And in that, you will find a recommendation that we enact a fee structure to do exactly what you're proposing. So we are not proposing this set of changes to you, and we recognize that you're the final authority. We're not proposing this and just walking away and say, oh, we're done. This is not to the exclusion of other tools or mechanisms that we could use to create affordable housing, including establishing a fee by which then we would put into a fund and we could then use to identify land and build affordable housing. So that is one of the recommendations, and we will be coming back to you, but first we'll need to make a stop before the Board of Selectmen and RTM to set up a fund.
Those are points 3 and 4, right?
Yes. So I think your point is well made, and we understand that there are a multitude of ways to try to address this issue, and that one mechanism or tool is not going to get us where we necessarily want to be. And I don't believe, as I said before, and I think you recognize that there are 169 towns here. There's only 33 or 34 that are exempt from 8-30G that has the 10% threshold. That hasn't changed in the 30 years or 40 years that this law has existed. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change for the vast majority of towns, including Fairfield included. So 10% is, for a build-out community like Fairfield, is not, I don't believe, a realistic goal. But that, we have to work within the existing construct of what the state statutes provide. If we're concerned about unwanted 8-30G applications under present statutes, either we get above the 10% or we provide for a moratorium or apply for a moratorium that gives us some temporary relief. As to timing, I will say that why we advance these particular set of recommendations is that we understand that there are market forces at play currently, and we understand or sense that there will be development applications that will be put before you that would meet this 10-unit threshold. And we are concerned, given our past experience, that we not miss that opportunity. And whether it produces 5 or 10 units, it's 5 or 10 units that we otherwise wouldn't have.
And those units would still be built, nonetheless.
And those units would still be built if you approve the project. Nothing changes whether or not you find an application either meets your requirements or doesn't meet your requirements. All it does is impose an additional requirement the developer would need to meet if he's over that 10-unit threshold to set aside at least 10% of those units as affordable.
Yeah, and they provides an incentive for them to operate within our regulations and meet all the other of our regulations in terms of design.
In the design residence district, if you're going to apply for a density bonus, it does provide a little better exchange than what we currently allow for. And I think that in that sense, I don't necessarily know whether or not that's going to be enough of an incentive, but I think right now it's clearly it's no incentive at all, so it's meaningless. So I think that this modest change, I do think it's relatively modest in terms of the proposals with respect to 10.6. would allow us at least to raise a plausible argument that we have an alternative to making an application under 8-30G. I know the hour is late. I think there was some questions as to the standing of the committee. We certainly worked with this board before. The committee has made recommendations or text amendment proposals to the commission as it relates to accessory apartments. Didn't turn out so well for the Affordable Housing Committee, but we appreciate the opportunity to present these proposals for your consideration. And we understand full well that you need to make a determination of whether these changes are in fact warranted. And I think with that, unless there's other questions, I'll be happy to sit down.
Does anyone
Thank
else
you
have
again.
any questions?
I have nothing else.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And with that, I'll close the public hearing and adjourn the hearing.